There's a number of different design strategies that we employ to try and address this. One of them is simply based on light. With your artificial lighting, it could have to deal with color temperature, trying to stay away from those really harsh white lights. But there's also an element of bringing in the outdoor light. So we will try to have big open windows, getting into a lot of spaces that might be dark. Things like stairwells. Those people that have been incarcerated previously may have had a challenging situation that occurred inside a stairwell or some not well lit space within a building. So again, trying to really bring in that natural light. There's an element of wayfinding that comes into play. People that are dealing with various stresses in their life or different triggers, we want them to be able to easily navigate throughout a building and between spaces.
It's great to hear trauma-informed design being talked about more and more and come into general use. I think in a funny way though, it really means just good design appropriate for who you're designing for. Look at who you're designing for and design for that person, that community, that program. So the thing about trauma-informed design really shows up, particularly in transitional and also supportive housing for formerly unhoused, right? Because you cannot be living in a tent on a sidewalk. That is trauma. That environment is trauma. Being sick in a jail or a prison is trauma, all right? Whether you kind of acknowledge it as that or not, it significantly affects the place where you're coming from and then what you need, right? And so there's some subtleties to that I still think the design community, including us at KTGY, are still discovering, because some of the, for lack of a better word, cliches like calming paint colors, things like that, it's good to acknowledge that, but that's not really meeting people where they are. That's a kind of formula. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that people are individuals. How do you address a population of individuals, some who have maybe been turned extremely introverted, some that are a little bit overly extroverted by their circumstances? So what does the building do to address that in a way that's good for both of those types? But one is, what is the experience of getting in and out of an elevator, right? So is the elevator grindingly slow? Is it lowly lit? Is it the cheapest possible institutional finishes on the inside? Does it open to a generous space or a constricted corridor? Just those sort of things. You know, if I had an extra 2 feet when I get out of the elevator, if there aren't places that I can feel like people are lurking, generally they're not lurking. These are safe buildings, but the feeling that someone could be lurking around the corner, that's the impact of trauma. The other, more specific to unit design, and I think I've mentioned corridor design on the way to your unit, right? That they're not too long, that they are well lit. Ideally, if they're naturally lit, that's better, or at least well lit with a good light color temperature, that it really feels like a home corridor would feel. And then when you get to the unit, there's silly things, right? Like making sure that you have the ability to look at who's knocking on your door with a little peephole. But I think the other is, you know, does the unit itself have enough light? Is it able to have enough privacy with the right window coverings? You know, do the finishes remind you of the cheapest possible thing there is, or do they feel like a home, right? Has it been designed with some thought and creativity? That doesn't mean everything has to be super fancy or super expensive. It just means it has to be thought through.